A warm welcome to all the participants of Indian Media Leaders East Summit, and this is the valedictory session of the day and of the summit. And from looking back, yesterday we looked at digital transformation, then we looked at advertising and the business models, and today morning we also looked at distributed newsrooms, and then today afternoon we come to a very interesting another 3 sessions as in the valedictory. We will start with constructive journalism. We'll hear from our friend from Denmark, Mr. Ulrik Hagerup, and then we'll follow over to North America to hear from the case of drivers of digital subscription from New York Times, Mr. Ben Cotton, and then we'll end up with Mr. Philip Crawley, again from North America, from Canada, talking about digital transformation and translating print value into digital. Before we proceed, and then before I introduce chairman for the session this afternoon, my colleague from UK, Shirley Narriton, I would like you to watch the video of our sponsors. May I have the video now, please?
Hi, PBI Media has been automating newspaper production around the world for 35 years and is shaping the future of the publishing industry together with more than 100 customers from India and all over the world.
And if you're interested in how our new publishing platform can help you to save costs and produce securely, even in times of crisis, then register now for our webinar on October 26th. Stay safe.
The next one.
Web publishing is a tough business. You're always juggling between creating content, growing traffic, and turning a profit. It can all quickly become overwhelming. That's why we built Ad Pushup. Ad Pushup is a revenue optimization platform that can help you grow your revenue by using ad layout testing, header bidding, ad block monetization, new ad formats, and bid price optimization. We will increase demand for your website by connecting you to 30,000 advertisers via 50 exchanges. We optimize 50 billion impressions every year for 300 plus publishers, including Reddit, CNET, FileHippo, and NDTV, delivering an average revenue growth of 40%. Ad Pushup is a Google partner, IAB member, and backed by strong investors, including Microsoft Ventures. So you're in safe hands. Want to learn more? Request a demo today.
Now, I would like to hand over the session to my colleague, Shirley Narriton, who is the director of World Editors Forum, the global network of editors within WAN-IFRA. Shirley is a seasoned newspaper media professional, having spent more than 20 years in South African newspapers as a journalist and also as editorial manager. She is now based in UK, and then she directs activities of World Editors Forum. With brief words, I'd like to hand over the session to Shirley. Over to you.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Magdub. My job today is to introduce you to a really good friend of WAN-IFRA, Ulrik Hagerup. He's the founder and CEO of the Constructive Institute in Denmark. He's a journalist with an incredible pedigree. He was the former executive director of news at the Danish public broadcaster. He's an award-winning journalist and formidable public speaker on issues of leadership and strategy. He's got a couple of books under his belt. The one was Constructive News, a confrontation with a negative view of the press, which I highly recommend. He's also a former member of the World Economic Forum's Global Council on the Future of Journalism. He was editor-in-chief of the Danish broadsheet Jyllands-Posten for 8 years, I think, in the early 90s, and he then went on to head up the first multimedia newsroom at Nordjyske. He's a Knight of Dannenborg and was awarded the Danish equivalent of the Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting in 1990. Ulrik has very strong opinions on news being at a tipping point. The timing of his presentation is ideal, and I'm not going to say more because I know he's got a lot to talk about. Thanks, Ulrik.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you, Sherilyn. Yes, I do talk a lot, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you about something which is really on my mind. This is our beautiful logo. Nobody really understands it, but I've made it myself. So I'm proud of it. Let me start with a question. I don't know if you can remember when you were 17, 18 years old, should decide what you wanted to do with your life. You could have chosen to become a lawyer or consultant or something more so you could become rich, but you decided to go into journalism. And why was that? I think for most of it, it was the same answer. We wanted to tell important stories for people in order for them to make up their own mind. And in the process, we could have a great life, traveling and asking people all kinds of questions. But it was the idea of doing good for society that made us choose journalism instead of a lot of other stuff. But then we entered journalism schools. Then we started our internships, and the culture became part of us. And for me, it started the first day in journalism school when my teacher, we were all sitting there, 400 young future journalists, and we were completely confused, but so eager to get started into this great profession, which we knew nothing about. And we had this teacher, and he was looking at us and he was saying, a good story is a bad story. If nobody gets mad, it's not journalism, it's advertising. And we took notes. Oh, that was what it was all about. And he was quoting these great editors, such like this one from the Sunday Times. Before interviewing any politician, ask yourself, why is this bastard lying to you? And we took notes. Oh, that was how we were supposed to do it. We were watching VHS cassettes, videos where great journalists looked like Robert Redford, and they brought down presidents. And we wanted to go out and bring down presidents, which was really, really terrible when we got the first internship, realizing we live in a monarchy, but then we had to bring down some other people in order to get the respect from other journalists. The biggest fear for me and a lot of my colleagues has been throughout my career that somebody that I looked up to came up to me and said, you're just holding the microphone. You're not being critical enough. You don't belong in the newsroom. You belong in the marketing department. That would be the worst. So honestly, I have almost been a little aggressive so everybody could see that I was not handing the microphone to people. When I talk to journalism students all over the world now, I still hear journalism students say, we learned that the goal of journalism is to be critical. That is not the case. That has never been the goal of journalism, but being critical is the most important tool for good reporting. Don't trust anything until you have researched it, until you have documented it. But we have turned it upside down. And future colleagues of ours from journalism schools all over the world learn from their teachers that they have to find the conflict in any story in order to make it newsworthy. Why? Because of culture. And that has consequences. I think we have to realize that our profession, more than any other profession, is the filter between reality and the public perception of reality. And why is that important? It's important because people make decisions in their lives, not only when they vote, but in any decision they make in their lives, not based on facts, but on what they perceive as being facts. So that's what a lot of politics is all about. It's about slogans, perceptions. In Brexit was the result of a slogan war. We want our country back, they said. Who stole it? But that doesn't matter that Germany didn't steal Great Britain. But if you can create that perception in the voters' minds, that what will determine it. But you also know it in our business. 40%, up to 50% of Americans think that Fox News slogan is true, fair and balanced. I trust you. It is not. A lot of young people around the world now think we will live in rubber boats in 4 years because we will all be flooded. Nobody has said that the world is going to drown. But there's a lot of problems with climate change. We have to do something about it, but no climate expert has said the world is going under. But a lot of teenagers think so. And a lot of oil companies, they have changed their logo colors. So now BP, for instance, they have this beautiful logo. Why? They produce fossil fuels, but this logo is about a sun, it's about green. They want to tell us that we are green, but they are not. They are still producing things that change the CO2 level in the world. Honestly, I'm so happy this turned out to be a Zoom conference. Just imagine I had to go to India, because this morning I just Googled just to figure out how's the situation in India. So I went to your news organizations just to see, how do you filter the world? What's going on there? And just look at the stories. It's not lies. It's well told. It's beautiful layout. No problem there. But just see the kind of stories that are there. India is a terrible place. It must be. If you read the newspapers, watch TV, everything is burning. Everything is, everybody is put into jail. Buildings are collapsing. People are boycotting. There are crises, and people are taken into custody. And it's not a lie. It happens. But is that the real picture of India? I, like you, don't know math. That's what's the real reason why we went into journalism. So somebody told me this is the curve of normality. So the curve of normality say in many cases, most things is in the middle. But we have a tendency to focus on the extreme, either on the left or more rightly on the right. And we cover it in such a degree that people think what is extreme becomes normal. We focus our objectives, our cameras, our microphones to people who are extreme, who create drama and conflict. And that has consequences, because if it's true that we filter the world for people, then people think the world is mainly full of extremists. So is this a picture of India that is presented, if we say the word India to people in India or elsewhere in the world? What do we think about when we think about India? Is it this? Is it this? Or is it this? Or do we ever see this? So how do we present the world is really important. And that's why our profession, our choice of profession when we're 17 or 18 years old is so important. And we have to understand what we're doing. I made a talk for the international news bureaus in the world, and I was just counting one day at the conference, the latest 50 stories produced by AP. They filter the world for a lot of news organizations such like yours, and they're not special, and they don't lie, and they tell very well. But these 50 stories, only 5 of them were not directly depressing. One of the stories was about Dalai Lama, who was not dead anyway, because they had just told that. So that was a mistake. But the rest of the stories had these words in the headlines. They were not lies. It was true, it happened. But was that really what was going on in the world that day? Was that a representation of reality? Do we give people the best obtainable version of the truth, which is a great definition of journalism? Or do we just do stories based on our culture? A good story is a bad story. This is a global illness. And the media strategy in the digital world is speeding this up, because we don't have time to think. And if you don't have time to think and you compete on this war of attention in order to get the eyeballs and the clicks and the likes, what do? You just do more of what you always done. You try to say, give people more news, louder stories, more breaking, more yellow, sharper headlines, faster deadlines on more and more platforms with few people and less money. If you were a McKinsey consultant, would you look at this and say, this sounds like a winning strategy? Not really, and it is not. We can't beat Twitter, and is that the goal of journalism? Do people tell you, we want more news, we want more information? They would most likely tell you, if you listened, we're drowning in information. Help us clean up, be trustworthy, help us give us an accurate picture. This guy is doing media analysis all over the world. He said negativity is an illness caused by even serious newspapers, news media all over the world. And the problem is not that the numbers are wrong. The problem is that the picture gets wrong. So if it's true that we have a tendency to focus on things that are extreme, what does it do to people? This is a big survey a few years ago. Between reality, that's the light blue, and the public perception of reality, which are the dark blue. Take, for instance, France. 8% Muslim people in France, when they're being asked, they think that 31% of people in France are now Muslim. And if the only people in France you know who are Muslim are those you see in TV, killing people, being terrorists and extremists, who will you vote for in a French election? How's the economy going? Very important. At this time, look at Italy, for instance, 12% unemployment rate. But the stupid Italian people think that the unemployment rate is 49. If you think that half your population in your country can't find a decent job, you have lost all faith in the system and democracy, and you will vote for any stand-up comedian coming up and say, I will do it much better. In the United States, the unemployment rate fell to a record low of 4.9% 4 years ago when Donald Trump was elected. Because the unemployment rate was the lowest in 9 years, but people thought, Republicans and Democrats alike, all of the United States, that the unemployment rate was 32%. 32. Who will you vote for if you think 1 out of 3 cannot find a decent job? There's a group of people in the world who really know how to play this. Our culture, it's terrorists. The most important weapon for them are not suicide bombs or Kalashnikovs or knives. It is journalists, media, because they do something dramatic. We have to cover it and we love it. And we do it 24 hours a day and with big headlines, and we spread the fear, and that's what they want us to do. So that's a big dilemma for us. How can we cover terrorism without supporting terrorism? We have to think, we have to know what we are doing. And yes, we did create Donald Trump. We overexposed him. At a time when he was not really big, he got more media exposure than any other presidential candidate in the United States. Why? Because he talked into our news criteria, especially in the American media. And as he said at that time, media loves me. Why? He was a freak show. Expressed by Leslie Moonves from the CBS when he was being criticized as a publisher. Why do you overexpose Donald Trump? Why do you give him so much airtime? He replied, it might not be good for America, but it's damn good for the CBS. The money's rolling in, bring it on, Donald, go ahead, keep going. As a prime example of how we have lost the purpose of us being journalists. Why are we journalists? We want to do good for society, not only for bottom line. Journalism is so much more than any product to be sold, but we are forgetting that. This is not about lies and misinformation. It's about, the most scary thing is that it has become socially acceptable around the world for people to say to each other, I don't want to watch it anymore. I don't want to read it. I get depressed. I don't want to have my kids watch it. There's nothing I can do about it. This is a story from Washington Post, the most scary story ever for the last 2 years. The story was about a giant fitness chain in the United States banning the use of news in the fitness chain when you're standing on the treadmill. Out of the argument, it doesn't relate to a healthy lifestyle to watch news. Can you imagine? A few years ago, people will tell each other it's the essence of being a decent citizen to watch news, to read the paper. If you don't, you're out of society. Now it is becoming, especially in the Western world, more and more socially acceptable to say, I don't want to do anything about it. Then I will play PlayStation, watch Netflix series day in and day out. And I will go on Facebook and check out with my 254 closest friends. This is what is scary. We are missing the boat. We have to ask ourselves 5 tough questions now. Are we in the global news culture so focused on getting attention, more than that giving people the obtainable version of the truth? Has media owners turned journalism into a product more than seeing it as an essential part of democracy? Are we more interested in news stories that are not wrong than if they are actually painting a true picture? And here it comes. Is journalism really part of the problem of the trust meltdown in democracy? And how can we become part of the solution? Because we have to. Because if we don't give people an accurate picture of the world, who will? Interest groups? Insurance companies? Banks? Politicians themselves? No. We have to do that. But then we have to dare to look ourselves into the mirror and take the consequence. That's what constructive journalism is all about. No, it's not a religion. It's nothing, you can't convert it into it. There's no Bible, but it's a way of talking. It's a new vocabulary. I invented the word constructive because I thought nobody could be against being constructive, having or intended to have a useful or beneficial purpose. I was wrong. A lot of criticism out of that, but it's the best I could find. So it's like investigative reporting. When that was invented a few years ago, we invented that in the late 70s, early 80s, because journalism was not doing good enough job keeping power to account. So we had to invent a new word, because we had a word we could start talking about it. We could invent new tools, new question techniques, how to get the document out of governments who didn't want to give it to us. All that came out of having a vocabulary. Same thing with constructive journalism. And no, it's not a North Korean version of news where you ignore problems and paint the sky blue. No, it's not. It's a new mindset of journalism. Can we bridge build in society at the same time as when we control power? Can we combat the American way of seeing the world in journalism? If it bleeds, it leads. Can we fight one-sided journalism where we only look at the world and find quotes, documents, numbers that will, sources that will confirm our angle when we start our research? Or can we see the world with both eyes, insisting we have to see the good and the bad, the happy and the sad, to give people a fair and square picture of the world? Because journalism is a feedback mechanism that should help society self-correct. So when I should try to figure out what do I mean by all this, I mean, there are two sets of glasses you could put on when you are when you are a reporter working in a newsroom at a newspaper such as yours. One is not, when I was young, it was not called breaking news, it was just called news. Same thing. It's about now, tell people that what has happened as fast as technology allows you to. Asking what and when, the more dramatic the better. We play the role of a police car and we angle on the drama and the conflict. And the more dramatic and the more full of conflict, the better it is for the story. Then there's investigative story. Good Lord for that. But controlling power, the fourth estate. But what is that? It's always about yesterday. Think about it. It's always about, it's looking backwards. It's trying to find out who's to blame for the problems we're in. Who did it? Why did it happen? We're critical. We play the role of a prosecutor or a judge, and we angle on the crook and the victim. And what's the consequence of that? If it's true that we filter the world for people, the filter between reality and the public perception of reality, then people will talk about now and yesterday, and they will talk about what is full of drama and conflict and the crooks and the victims. But what's the essence of debate in society? Or what's the essence of politics? It's about tomorrow. The truth is, it doesn't really fit into our news strategy, does it? So constructive journalism is not an alternative to the first two. You can't be constructive if there's not a documented problem to be constructive about. But constructive journalism insists that you could take the next step, saying journalism could also be about tomorrow. It could also have the goal of inspiring people, asking questions none of us learned in journalism schools. Now what and how, pointing to the future, being curious, facilitating debates about potential solutions and best practice. Is that journalism? Yes, it is. Does it work? Yes, it does. But you should be critical, of course, also of this. You should never cross the line of being a politician or activist. Don't tell people what is the solution. That's not our job. But we could inspire to it. We could facilitate. We could engage in a dialogue. We could place ourselves not as using technology as just another form of pushing out our stories, but really engaging in a dialogue about potential solutions. How can we help solve the problem they have? And our words really matters. Look at this, Daily Mail, same story, same day in the beginning of coronavirus. But one of them was published in Ireland, the other one in Great Britain. Many loved ones will die, and the other one, together we can save many lives. What's the perspective of it? How much does it engage? What creates fear? What creates action and inspiring? Words matters. This is spreading around the world like wildfire. It answers the question of why public media quality journalism matters to society, gives our news a clear purpose. They say it, the umbrella organization for public service companies. Constructive strategies have been implemented in more and more newsrooms, especially in Denmark, in Scandinavia, Germany, France, even Australia is picking this up, and is now saying they use constructive journalism to report on problems and solutions. And it does work. At The Guardian, they did it for 18 months and counted in the digital world. People read constructive stories, they found, more than traditional stories. The truth was, they found, people don't read traditional news stories to the end about suicide bombs. They scan. But stories about people who does something the rest of us might learn from, that tackle actual problem we feel personally. We want to do that. We want to read that. We want to spend time on it. People read these stories to the end and they share them more. And their editor-in-chief say, we will now develop ideas that help improve the world, not just critique it. Despair is just another form of denial. People long to feel hopeful again. And young people especially yearn to feel the hope that previous generations once had. That's what we should do. If we don't, we are dead. Finally, a story about lighthouses. Alan Rutsbridger of The Guardian, former editor-in-chief, he once said about lighthouses, it's like journalism. There's no business model for lighthouses, but ships sink if they're not there. This is a picture about a lighthouse in Denmark, and the wind of change was eroding the sand, and it was about to fall on the beach, and they were about to tear it down, just like journalism, being eroded by the wind of change and rough seas. But what happened? Some guy, this guy, had an idea, a dream. What about if we don't tear it down? What about if we move it? Can you move a big, heavy lighthouse? And he did. He actually moved it into safety, because we need lighthouses, such as we need journalism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ulrich. That's there's so much to think about. There are two questions on the board. One is, which I'm sure you face every time you talk, is the difference between solutions journalism and constructive journalism. And the second, all right, take that one first, and then.
Yeah. What we talk about when we talk about constructive journalism, we talk about three things. First, we talk about solutions. Journalism can be inspirational. That's the easy part. So that's solution journalism. Then we also talk about how do we do stories not only on the white or more likely on the black, but in the colors in between. How do we put nuances into our stories? How do we do myth-busting stories? People think the world is like that, but it's not. Let's tell them that. And the third one is finding ways in which we can engage people in a debate which is not in a boxing ring with a blue corner and a red corner. Can we find a way where we play the role as a facilitator instead of a referee who would rather have people standing up again and keep boxing because that's where the entertainment is? We have helped news organizations develop debate formats, which is about people shutting up and listen and finding compromises instead of the winner should always be the most loud and the most rude and the guy with the most likes. We have to change the format of it. And so we have three things, and solution journalism is focusing mainly on one. But there's nothing, I've completely worked with solution journalism, but it's not the only thing.
Excellent. Someone anonymously is asking, is constructive journalism not an escapism from problems?
No, it is not. And of course, that's the myth. And that would be, it will probably also be the first thing that I would be afraid of. This would be the dream of for any dictator or any communication director. Yes, don't focus on our problems, but only on how it can be better. That's why I don't like to talk in China. So you can't be constructive unless you have documented a problem to be constructive about. Otherwise, it's just a happy story or nice story that is really doing nothing but keeping a smile on people's faces. And that's not the job of journalism. I don't mind people smiling, but the goal of journalism is to give people a fair and accurate picture of the world in order for them to make up their own mind. We're not in the shrink business. If there's something terrible happen, we should tell about it. But maybe on day 2 or 3, we should start asking the question, how can we as a society avoiding this happening again? That's where the constructive approach comes in. Constructive journalism is not about every story all the time should be constructive. Sometimes we just have to report what has happening. But then the follow-up story most likely will be very relevant, asking the questions, okay, now what and how?
So coming at that from a slightly different perspective, in an environment where you've got a populist movement and perhaps independent journalism's on the extremes, how do those independent news operations practice constructive journalism while still practicing their critical journalism?
I think it is really a good strategy. I mean, the most important thing is that people think that we are there for them. And we are there for them as an authority. And how do you become an authority? You're an authority if you know what you're talking about. Truth is, too many journalists, we don't know what we really are talking about. We don't know it enough. And you become an authority if people think that you put the public good before your self-interest. And the truth is, a lot of people out there don't think we do that. We're only interested in their eyeballs so we can try to make money on them. Or they think we're only interested in trying to make them think the way we think. That's manipulation. I'm not saying we're always doing that. I think I just say a lot of people think we do. And then we have a problem. So I think we need to shape up, know what we're talking about, finding out how can we present the world in a decent, fair manner, not being boring, but trying to do it with passion, accuracy, nuances in order for people to make up their own mind. If we do that, people will find out they need journalism. We discovered that all over the world during COVID-19, and we still see that. In the beginning, people flocked to legacy media and newspapers. Why? Because they needed somebody to tell them the truth, the facts. And we found out that we should not only count the dead, but also people who got well again, or people who was not infected. Because if we didn't, we would give them a screwed picture about it. Don't ignore the problems, but also give them the nuances and the inspiration to how can we do it better. If we do that, we have a chance in people's lives. Otherwise, there's so many other ways that people can kill time.
Okay, that's a really good note to finish on. Do you want to just have a 1 minute on your Global Constructive Journalism Conference that you're advertising so boldly in the background?
You're most kind. We're trying to create a global movement, mainly to engage in a conversation about exactly this. Find the best examples, try to learn from each other. So we are conducting what we call 24 hours for the future of journalism on December 15th and 16th this year as a hybrid conference. We hope to gather many thousand people from around the world in a hybrid conference with an audience in Aarhus, where we're located in Denmark, but then it travels around the world following the sun with different sessions in London, in Sao Paulo, in New York, in Silicon Valley, in Auckland, in Sydney, in India, in Africa, and back in Europe, try to find out how can we do this better? What are the principles future reporting should build on? So it's called 24 Hours for the Future of Journalism. Be part of the solution, not the problem.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Please join. It's free.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think now we move on to the next session. So I request all the attendees to go on the timeline, and Sherlyn, you too. You have to go on the back to the timeline and then join the next session. Thank you, Ulrich, and then hope to see you again next time. Thank you.